Hello guys, welcome to Hankins Custom Rifles. I'm Jeff Hankins and we've got a rifle here that I'm going to talk to you guys about today. This is a 45 caliber smokeless muzzleloader that I had to rebuild, and I'm just going to go over a little bit of the history of this gun and tell you something about it. Now, a customer of mine that I had no idea who he was until after he contacted me about this gun. He brought me this gun and he was so upset over it that he wanted me to fix it. He bought this rifle from another smokeless muzzleloader builder, and I don't know if I should say the name of the builder or not on the YouTube video, so I'm just not going to say it. But I want you guys to make sure that when you buy one of these guns, there's a lot of good builders out here. I'm not the only guy out here that can build a good muzzleloader. But I'm going to tell you, for every good one there is, there's a bad one. The guy that built this gun shouldn't be building guns. I'm just going to tell you flat out, that's the way I feel about it. That's the way this customer felt about it. When he brought it to me and I inspected it and went over this gun, we did not find one thing on this rifle that was done correctly. And that's pretty sad when the guy paid over $4,000 for this gun, and I could have built it for way less money. You know, so like I've said before, you can pay more, but you can't buy better. Don't fall into the trap that these guys put out there with some of these YouTube hunting videos and how they're shooting deer and blowing them up with tannerite bombs and that kind of stuff. That's just a bunch of baloney that they're using as a sales and marketing strategy to suck you in to buy one of their guns. There's no sense in trying to advertise your rifle like that. Bring it out to the range like I do. Show what it can really do. Come up to the Kentucky Challenge and beat me or one of my rifles. Now, I've won 5 Kentucky Challenges straight in a row. My rifles have won first place at every Kentucky Challenge we've had. Recently, one of my guns just won the Indiana National Muzzleloader Rifle Association, the NMLRA Association. They won the national title with my gun at Friendship. Shot the second best score that they have ever shot at Friendship on history, on record. So that just goes to tell you, my guns do speak for themselves. And that was shooting blackhorn powder at the Indiana Championship at the National Muzzleloaders Association. They have to shoot blackhorn. And there's been guys out there that said my ignition system won't work with blackhorn. He shot the competition with Pittman bullets, and they said Pittman bullets don't shoot good with blackhorn. Well, we're here to tell you guys that that's all a bunch of hogwash. It's baloney. Don't believe everything you hear. Call me and talk to me, and I'll fill you in straight out forward. I'm not going to blow no smoke up your you-know-what. And when we get done, you'll get a gun that's worth having. Now let's get back to this rifle. This customer, named Rocky, that's all I'm going to tell you. He bought this gun from the guy that built it. It's got a custom action on it, or you would think it was custom. He waited 15 months to get the gun. He called the guy up and he said, "Hey, is my gun done yet?" And he says, "No, it's not done." He says, "Well, I'm going to come down there and just get my money, and I'm going to have somebody else build my gun." He told him, "Well, I'm going to be building your gun. I'm starting on it next week. I'll have it done in 2 weeks." Well, this gun here looks like it was built in about a half a day. So apparently the guy jumped on it. He didn't want to give Rocky his money back after having it for 15 months. Now, the 15-month deal don't bother me. I've got guns that I've been working on for 15 months. Some of them's even longer than that. But when you get it done, when the customer gets it, he's not going to be disappointed like Rocky was. So anyway, make a long story short, 2 weeks later, Rocky drives down to this guy's place and picks this gun up in person. And when the guy handed him the gun, Rocky told me he wanted to puke. After paying that much money and waiting that long for the rifle, he was just absolutely sick as soon as he saw it. So he called me, brought it to my shop. I went over it pretty much with a fine-tooth comb and found everything that was wrong with it. And I don't know if I'll be able to remember to tell you everything in this video or not, but we're going to try. The gun was supposed to be pillar bedded, and it was not. It wasn't bedded whatsoever. It was just bolted in. One of the stocky stocks, which is a great stock, bolted in an aluminum block. There was no skim bedding whatsoever in there. He was quoted a bed job. You can't hardly count that as a bedding job. You know, that's just straight from stockies and you bolt it in and you're done. So he didn't get his bedding job. The barrel was supposed to be 28 inches long. It's 26 and a half, and I'll explain to you why the barrel's short. The stock was a low gloss finish. It's just a standard stock from Stockies. Didn't have this high gloss clear coat on it. But on the side of the stock right here on both sides, it had vice jaw marks, little crisscross checkerings like you would see on a knurling tool. And the vice jaw marks, it's obvious, we know what he did. The gunsmith that built this clamped this into a vise right here, and I hold my stocks the same way, but I use soft padded rubber jaws between the vice jaws of the vise and the gun itself. Put a piece of rubber between there so you don't get that problem. Well, make a long story short, there was two big dents right here where the stock gets bigger. Okay, it's just where the stock, the forearm flares out right there. And then, not to mention the checker that was in there, and I sanded that all out and re-clear coated this stock to make it look like a new one. And I've got, you can still see a little bit of that dent right there. I couldn't get it all out, but I got as much as I could, and this side is gone. That side over there was pretty caved in. Okay, that's the first thing that was bad. Well, the second thing. The first thing was there was no bedding in there. The second thing, the stock was screwed up. It's got a big scratch over here that I fixed. The bolt on this gun, it looks like a Remington 700 action. It's got a Remington 700 footprint. It uses a lot of Remington 700 parts. Let me pull the bolt out for you. And I don't know if somehow they messed this up in the machining or what, but this bolt is about 100 thousandths shorter than a Remington 700 short action bolt. Because what I was going to do, this bolt was so screwed up, I was just going to put a new bolt in there. But then when the action was too short for the Remington 700 bolt, I had to invest a lot of time into fixing this bolt right here. I had to put a Seiko extractor in it. This guy uses a 10mm pistol cartridge, and he would slide it into the bolt face like you do a 209 primer. He had a little slot cut in the bolt face, and you'd slide this in there. That may be why he cut the action a little shorter. I don't know. But the firing pin, when the rifle was fired, the firing pin stuck out of the firing pin hole 150 thousandths. So I had to cut that off to make it right, or else you would have been piercing primers. Now, Rocky brought this gun home. He never even fired it. He brought it home, next day called me, brought it straight to my shop, drove 200 miles, brought it down to my house. When I took the gun apart, there was gunpowder all in the action. There's gunpowder down in the trigger. I mean, this thing was a mess. The guy had shot it. Apparently, it was obvious he had shot the gun, which is good. Every gun should be test fired before it leaves the shop. But it's also obvious that he had to pull a load. I don't know why he had to pull a load, if he got a bullet stuck in the barrel or what the deal was, but he had to pull the load. The gunpowder went all down and got all down in his brand new trigger. I had to blow all that out, so that was a mess. When you open the bolt on this gun, I'm going to turn it around for you and show you the other side here. When you open this bolt, you were supposed to be able to just take these pistol cartridges that he uses to detonate ignition, and you were supposed to just be able to slide it in the bolt. Well, he drilled this little hole and put this little screw in as a bolt stop, but he drilled it too far back, so the bolt, when you open the bolt, you couldn't even get to it. So when you took your primer module out, you had to hold the bolt forward like this and try to keep your thumb on it somehow so you could reach in there. Totally just a bad design. The guy never thought about what he was doing before he drilled that hole. He had it drilled in the wrong spot. So I took and put it on an indexing head in my Bridgeport, and I opened up this pocket. So now you can get your primer module in the on the bolt face, and you can remove it. You got enough room to get your fingers in there. This Picatinny rail, it's a bad action Picatinny rail. It's stainless steel. I bought a blank from them with no holes in it, and I had to drill it to match this action. I drilled 2 extra screws in it too, so it's got 6 holes, 6 bolts in it now instead of 4. The spacings on there was of an oddball size, so nobody's Picatinny rails would work. Stillers wouldn't line up. One from Bat that was already drilled for another gun I had wouldn't line up. So I had to make one, and that's where we're at with the Picatinny rail. Moving on, let's see. The bolt handle is welded on crooked. You can actually see it sitting in there. It's welded on there crooked. That was something that I didn't want to take and try to grind off and fix. So we managed to live with the crooked bolt, but I did put a bolt knob on it. And let's move on to something else here. The guy's breech plug is a total mess. I had 3 of these rifles in my shop at one time to be fixed, repaired, something going on with them. 3 guns from this guy right here, and we had all 3 of the breech plugs out. Put all 3 of them on the table, measured all 3 of them. There was as much as 50 and 60 thousandths difference in the lengths of these breech plugs. So how are you going to order a breech plug to replace the one you've already got when the guy making the breech plugs can't make 2 of them exactly the same? He had 3 of them on the table. They were all 3 different, every one of them. And I'm not kidding you, fellas. That's the honest to God truth. This breech plug is made out of a piece of all thread. Just an old piece of soft metal all thread. You can go down to Harbor Freight or any kind of hardware store and buy this. Machine it out. It's got some of the ugliest machining marks on it that I've ever seen. There's a hole drilled in the center, and he puts a set screw in it. And that's what adjusts your headspace. When you tighten that screw, your headspace will get loose. If you back it out, your headspace will get tight. Well, when you close this up and you close the bolt, every time you close the bolt, it's going to turn that screw in just a little bit. So your headspace, the more you shoot, the worse it's going to get. Eventually, you're going to have a gap. Once you get a gap, you guys know what happens. You get primer erosions, and stuff's going to start leaking. But if you can look at this screw right there, you can zoom in on that. You can see that that screw's not even in the center of the hole that's in the breech plug. That's off. This is just terrible work. This is a butcher shop that this guy's running, not a rifle building shop. We're going to move on now to the barrel. The barrel was supposed to be 28 inches long. It's 26 and a half. This is a Brooks barrel. This is the finish on it when you get it from Brooks. It's just a nice little sanded finish, probably about a 320 grit or so, and they do that on a machine, so it makes it easy for a guy like me, a real rifle builder, to bead blast it, or to polish it, or to sandblast it before they Cerakote it, which is what I did with this one. But if you look out here on the end, and a lot of people do this, and I don't know why they do it, but when they cut their threads, they dig this great big gouge in the end of the barrel right here, and they put this big step in it. For one, it's definitely not necessary. 2, it weakens your barrel. That's the weakest point now in this barrel, is that big cutout, that big nasty looking gouge. You know, you got to learn how to withdraw. You're threading it. You get to the point you need to pull the threads. You pull the threads and you disengage at the same time, and you get a nice, neat, clean looking blend in your threads. You don't have this nasty look here. I don't know if you can zoom in on the barrel here, but it's got a great big nasty burr. You can see the burr on that. he didn't even come back in and clean the burr off of that barrel. He put it in a 3-jaw chuck. That's another thing. Absolute no-no. You'll never see a barrel in a 3-jaw chuck in my shop. Everything goes in a 4-jaw chuck, independent jaws. Everything is indicated in, whether I'm doing a chamber on a 223 or putting a breech plug in a muzzle loader. It's got to be put in, indicated. You can see the chuck jaw marks on this barrel that he didn't even try to clean up. Didn't use any aluminum. I mean, everybody, at least I would have thought everybody would protect their surface on the barrel. And you can see it. And he put this barrel in twice, because there's 2 sets of marks where he got one in, he tightened it down, so you got 3. He did something, he took the barrel out, put it together, realized that it wasn't right, had to put it back in the machine again and tighten down on it again for the second time, and put these nasty marks in there. I don't know if you guys can see them or not, but I'm going to bring them in here. You can see all 3 of the jaw marks. There's 2. You roll over here and you got 2 more. And then the 2 on this side, you can just barely see one of them. There it is. But what that's doing, guys, I've never ever seen a 3-jaw chuck that will close up perfectly on the axis of the bore. It's always going to be off center, so your barrel's going to wobble. You're going to cut it off center, and I can promise you that's what's wrong with his machine when we turn the barrel around and look at the other end. Because if you look at the other end, this has got a big taper, so you've only got one big dent right there. Let's start with number 1. There's jaw number 1, jaw number 2, and jaw number 3. And the jaws are only touching right here because the barrel's tapered. So his chuck jaws came all the way out to here, but he was only pinching right here. So you didn't have much of a grip. You should always put an aluminum sleeve in there. Take a copper penny or something and put it underneath your vice jaw and crush a copper penny or whatever you've got to keep from doing that. That guy just destroyed these barrels. I mean, yeah, you could clean it off. Nobody would have ever known it if he'd have just put it in the bead blaster and bead blasted the barrel like a finished $4,000 rifle should have had on it. Okay, and now we're going to move on out to the barrel, to this muzzle brake. I'm going to tell you why this barrel is 1.5 inches shorter than it should have been. Because it took him 3 tries to get this muzzle brake on. It's 15 thousandths off center. Still, it's not on center. That's telling me that his 3-jaw chuck ain't on center. He probably just clamped this barrel up in his machine, let this end out here just spin in space and do whatever it wanted to do. So yeah, the barrel's rotating, but it's spinning like this. So when you're cutting your tenon, you're cutting a cone. It might only be a little bit of a cone. It may only be a thousandths or 2 if you take and measure it out. But it's spinning like this, so you're cutting a cone. So, after putting the brake on the first time, which would have been way out here somewhere, he figured out that it wasn't lined up. So he cut a 1/2 inch off the barrel and he rethreaded it. He put it back on, realized, oh man, it still ain't lined up. Cut it off again, rethreaded it. It might have took him 3 or 4 tries. Well, the first time he put it on, he blended the brake in with the barrel that was way out here, which was smaller than it is down here. As he kept trying to get the brake to fit, the barrel got bigger, but the brake stayed the same size. So now you got this great big nasty hang nail, this big hanger right here. That's what I call them, hair lip, whatever you want to call it. But what he should have done, and what any good gunsmith would have done, was he would have thrown this muzzle brake in the garbage, or at least shaved off 40 thousandths of it right here and brought it back up to where it's bigger than the barrel, and then put it back on and blended it in correctly. But he didn't want to do that because this brake probably cost him 35 or 40 bucks, you know, so he didn't want to throw $40 in the trash when the poor guy that bought the gun spent $4,000 and he's going to give him this. This was a boat anchor. The breech plug screwed up, the muzzle brake's on wrong, so Rocky just decided put me a whole new barrel on there. The barrel contour on this gun is, in my opinion, way too thin. It's not much more than it's smaller than a Remington Sendero. You know, I mean, all your pressure's out here on these muzzle loaders. You need at least 3 inches of shank, or 4 preferably, and some guys go 5. But you need a lot of barrel down here. That's where your pressures are at. But anyway, this was just a total mess. He put a ramrod on the gun, and he didn't even put out, he had no barrel band or ferrule out here whatsoever. So you had a ramrod sticking out of the barrel, and you could take and go like this, and it would just bend clear down here. How long do you think that's going to last when you're out packing it around in the woods before you snag it on something and bend it and break the thing off on yourself when you're out in the woods? So, okay, we're going to keep going because I'm not done yet. He gave him this piece of metal. That was his bottom plate. Now, this is a bat trigger guard. That's not cheap. That's a good quality piece. That's made by Bat Machine. They don't send out no junk. But then he made this thing out of a piece that looks like 5/16 aluminum, and it looks like it was sawed out with a hacksaw. I'm not kidding you guys. Look at this. And that's what he gave him for a bottom metal. He didn't blend it in, didn't finish filing it. I mean, here's some big old saw marks. The radius on this side, the radius on this side is completely different. When you drop it down into the inlet on the gun stock where the trigger guard should go, should have had a hinged floor plate in it. It had a gap big enough around it you could have put enough dirt in to grow potatoes. It looked like, just looked terrible, crappy. So, I told Rocky, I said, I got enough floor plates laying around on guns that I converted. I'll just give you one, paint it black, just like I did the rest of his gun. So we painted it black, and it's in there, looks like it should look, okay? For the time that this guy spent, well, maybe not, because it probably took about 5 minutes to make that. But what he should have done, instead of making this thing, was just bought the guy a trigger guard. They're only like 80 bucks. You can pick them up all day long. You get lucky, you can find one on eBay for less than that. But just put a trigger guard on it. Give the guy what he paid for, all right? I think we got one more thing to talk about, and then I'm going to be done telling you the nightmares of this guy's gun. This is this builder's sizing die. Okay? I tried to use it. I was curious to see how it worked. It's made out of just a plain old piece of probably 1018 cold roll steel. It's soft. Pretty crappy machine work again, in my opinion. But theoretically, the way this worked is, like every one of these other dies out there, you tighten the top half against the bottom half, and it compresses this little cylinder inside to the point to where you can start sizing bullets. Well, I compressed this one. I screwed it as tight as it would go, and you can still drop a bullet through the hole. So his machine tolerances was way off on there. You can't even size a 452 bullet down to fit in that 450 gun. This thing's a piece of junk. Might as well throw that away. So he charged him that money for something that don't work. Terrible machine work on here. I mean, I haven't seen machine work like that in years. I just didn't think anybody would put something out like this. I'm serious, fellas. So, back to what I told you guys in some of my other videos. You can definitely pay more than you're going to pay me, but you will not get a better built rifle. This guy here now has over $6,000 in this gun. Not, you know, for what he paid the original guy to build it and what he had to pay me to fix it, because we put on a brand new barrel. We put on a new Brux barrel with fluting in it. We put on a new muzzle brake, a new ignition system. I worked on his bolt. I milled out his receiver. Painted his gun stock. You know, I mean, poor old Rocky's got a ton of money in this gun now, but he has put some really good optics on it. The optics on this is the attacker. Now this is the first focal plane model, about a $3,000 scope. It's a 5 to 25 power, nice scope. I've got an attacker on my gun, but it's the second focal plane, and I kind of like this first focal plane, the way it works. It looked pretty neat when I looked through it. I have bore sighted the gun already. We're going to shoot it some here in a little bit. He bought this radius rangefinder. Now I played around with it, and I shot the target down there, and it said 100 yards. I rangefind the target with my rangefinder, and it said 100 yards. But when I went to 400-yard target and I ranged it with the radius, it told me it was like 360 yards. And I know that's wrong, but this is not calibrated yet to this gun. There's a whole big sheet of stuff you got to do in there. You got to measure the height of the sight from the center of your bore. Then you go from the center of your sight to the center of this radius, and you got to add some numbers and do some stuff, and I didn't get into it quite that much. And you got to basically tune the rangefinder to see the same thing your scope's seeing. So we've got it pretty close, just sitting on there straight out of the box. My target was 100, big square sheet of plywood, so it hit it. When I went to my other target, it didn't hit it just right. So take a little work to sight that in, and I don't think I'll do that today, but it does look pretty cool sitting up on there. Now if you're out hunting and something comes out and it's 400 or 500 yards and you know you've got this thing calibrated right, you just put your scope on it. It's got a little pressure switch that you can mount right here wherever you want to mount it. You push the button and it reads the yardage, tells you how far it is, and then you can make your adjustments right here just as fast as you want to and make your shots. So anyway, guys, I think that's about all I'm going to say about this gun. I've ran over all the nightmares that poor old Rocky's had, and he's really upset. But instead of suing the other gunsmith, he just brought it to me, and I fixed it. So he's coming down next week to pick it up. I'm sure he's going to like it. He wasn't even expecting the clear coat on there. I just did that as a I don't know, as a favor, because I thought it needed to be done. He wasn't going to fix it, but I decided to just go ahead and fix it. But anyway, I don't know what we'll do with this whole barrel here. We can't hardly do much with it because that breech plug is so daggone long. It goes clear up here by the time it's screwed all the way in there. This barrel is pretty much junk. Unless I send it back to Brooks and have him turn it down, and I can cut this much of it off, and I might be able to make a short barrel for an encore or something. It's a brand new barrel. It's never even been fired. The insides are perfect. The outside of it's what's totally screwed up. So I'm going to take a little break and size some bullets for this gun, get some powder charges out, and we're going to test fire it a little bit down here at 100 yards today, and we'll let you know how it goes.